All right, listeners, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive with us?
Always excited to go exploring.
You know me, I'm always up for an adventure, especially when it comes to these amazing animals out there.
And today's adventure.
Well, today, we're heading to the Great Plains of North America. Picture wide open spaces, like those classic Western movie landscapes.
Got it. Vast grasslands stretching as far as the eye can see.
Exactly. And in those grasslands, battle is a pretty remarkable creature, the swift fox. Tiny but mighty, right?
Well, absolutely. Don't let their size fool ya. These foxes have quite the story, a real testament to resilience and, honestly, a bit of a comeback kid in the animal world.
That's what I love about these deep dives. You never know what twists and turns you're going to find. So let's rewind a bit. What's the historical picture for these swift foxes? I mean, where did they used to roam?
Well, historically, these guys were everywhere in the Great Plains.
Hmm.
Think from way up north in the Canadian prairies all the way down south to Texas. It was prime real estate for them.
Wow, that's a huge range. Canada to Texas. Talk about covering some ground. Makes you wonder what happened, right?
Yeah, it does make their decline pretty dramatic, doesn't it? And, there wasn't just like one single thing that caused it. It was more of a combination of factors, this unfortunate perfect storm.
Oh, man, a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Never a good sign.
Right. So as agriculture started expanding across the Great Plains, well, their habitat, all that grassland, it started shrinking.
Makes sense. I mean, more farms means less open prairie for these foxes.
Sadly, yeah. Those vast prairies were transformed into farmland, which basically meant fewer homes for these little guys.
It's like the neighborhoods were being bulldozed. So habitat loss was a big one.
Huge factor, absolutely. But then there's this other part, and this really shows how complex ecosystems can be. You see, back then there were all these efforts to, control predators like wolves and coyotes.
Because those were seen as threats to livestock and such, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Exactly. But the thing is, those programs, they didn't always discriminate. And guess who got caught in the crossfire?
Uh-oh. Sounds like trouble for our swift foxes.
You got it. Traps and poisons meant for those larger predators often ended up harming the swift foxes as well. It's a pretty stark reminder that, when we try to tinker with these delicate ecosystems, sometimes we get these unintended consequences.
Wow, that's kind of heartbreaking to think about. Trying to solve one problem and accidentally creating another.
Yeah, it's a harsh lesson about the interconnectedness of everything out there. But hey, there's good news too. Around the 1970s, conservationists really started to realize just how dire the situation was for the swift fox.
Oh, good. I was hoping for a turning point in this story. So what did they do?
Well, they kicked things into high gear. They started these captive breeding programs. Think of it like giving the swift foxes a safe haven where they could, raise their families and increase their numbers.
They're like a little fox sanctuary. That's pretty cool. And then what, did they just release them back into the wild?
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. They had to make sure those foxes had a fighting chance out there. So they focused on reintroducing them back into the wild, but specifically in areas where their habitat had been protected or restored. Canada and the northern U.S. were like the prime spots.
Okay, I'm picturing these little foxes getting a second chance at life in the wild. Were there any particular challenges they faced during these reintroductions?
Oh, for sure. Take the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, for example. They had this really amazing reintroduction effort where biologists worked directly with the Blackfeet community to bring the swift foxes back to their, historical home.
That's awesome. Community collaboration for the win. So what were some of the challenges? I mean, these foxes were coming back to a landscape that had probably changed a lot since their ancestors roamed there, right?
Absolutely. Things weren't exactly the same anymore, so the biologists had to be super strategic. They, tracked the foxes' movements to make sure they were adapting okay.
So, making sure they were finding food and shelter and all that.
Exactly. They also worked on making sure there were enough food sources for them, and, they even had to educate the public about the importance of sharing the landscape with these animals.
Yeah, getting everyone on board is key. It sounds like a massive effort, but a successful one, right?
It was. I mean, the swift fox is no longer classified as endangered. That's a huge victory for conservation.
That's incredible. Gives me hope. But I'm guessing the story doesn't just end there, right?
You're right. They're not out of the woods just yet. They're still considered a species of concern. Think of it like this. They've graduated from the emergency room to recovery, but they still need ongoing care and attention.
So they're on the mend, but still vulnerable.
Exactly. Habitat fragmentation is still a major issue. Imagine their habitat being chopped up into smaller pieces, like a puzzle that's been broken apart.
Oh, I see. So it's not just the amount of habitat, it's also how connected it is.
Bingo. And then, of course, there's the ever-looming threat of climate change, which could make things even more unpredictable for these little guys.
It's a lot to contend with. So even though their numbers are up, it's still a delicate situation.
For sure. And, it's not just about their population numbers. It's about recognizing the important role they play in the whole prairie ecosystem.
Yeah.
They're not just surviving, they're contributing.
Right. They're more than just cute faces. They're actually vital to the health of the whole prairie.
Exactly. In fact, they're what we call a keystone species.
A keystone species. Now, that sounds intriguing. What does that even mean?
Imagine an archway, right? You've got all these stones carefully fitted together, and then there's this one special stone at the top, the keystone. It holds the whole structure together.
Oh, I see. So a keystone species is like that. It's crucial for holding the whole ecosystem together.
Precisely. Take the swift fox away, and the whole prairie ecosystem weakens.
So how does the swift fox act as this keystone? What do they actually do?
Well, for starters, they're pretty amazing at keeping those pest populations under control. They love to munch on rodents, insects, even the occasional bird, all those critters that could quickly get out of hand if there wasn't something keeping them in check.
Ah, so they're like the natural pest control for the prairie. I love that. And I remember you mentioned their burrows earlier. Those play a role too, right?
Absolutely. Those burrows aren't just for the swift foxes themselves. Other animals, like burrowing owls and some snakes, they often use those abandoned dens for shelter. It's like a free housing program for the prairie.
That's amazing. So they're creating homes for others without even realizing it. And you said earlier that their presence is a good indicator of a healthy grassland. Why is that?
Well, swift foxes are pretty sensitive to changes in their environment. If the grasslands aren't doing well, the switch foxes will be the first to feel it. So if they're thriving, it usually means the whole ecosystem is in pretty good shape.
It's like they're the canary in the coal mine for the prairie.
You got it. Their health reflects the health of the entire ecosystem.
So the swift fox's story, it's like a roller coaster, right? Near extinction, then this incredible recovery, but still facing all these ongoing challenges.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of how resilient nature can be, but also how vulnerable.
It really highlights how much our actions impact these ecosystems, for better or worse.
And what we've learned from the swift fox, it's not just about them, it's about applying those lessons to other species facing similar threats.
Right. It's about understanding the bigger picture, the interconnectedness of it all.
Exactly. If we can understand the delicate balance of these ecosystems, and really grasp how our actions can have unintended consequences, then we can become better stewards of the natural world.
We've got to think beyond just one species. We've got to think about the whole web of life out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So the swift fox story, it's a story of hope. It's a story of challenges, and it's a story that's still unfolding.
And for all our listeners out there, it makes you wonder what other stories of resilience are out there, right? Waiting to be discovered.
What other creatures are facing these uphill battles, and what can we do to help them write a happier ending to their stories?
It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, listeners, and remember, never underestimate the impact you can have on the world around you. Even small actions can make a big difference.
Until next time.
See ya.